You in? Okay, perfect. Okay. Yeah, yeah, Dustin's gonna fix it now. Yeah, I may be there as well next Saturday, so we'll just coordinate on that if I'm there. You don't have to come. Thank you so much. Bye. All right, just a minute. We got to get the people in Tulsa connected to the Zoom here. So, and they had some trouble getting into the building. So, just bear with me for a minute.
Probably about us.
Hey, Tulsa, you there? You should be able to turn the video on.
Can you hear us? See
Mhm.
us?
I
We can't
can't.
see you yet because we don't have the TV on.
There you are.
Working on it.
I can see you guys.
Okay, we can't see you yet.
Yeah, we can't get the TV to turn on.
You might have to stand up. I think that like clock, it kind of blocks it.
Oh, the clock here.
Oh, yeah.
So the sensor's down there.
There we go.
Yeah, I heard it.
Perfect.
Can you see us now or see me?
It's
It's
loading.
working on it. No signal.
What HDMI?
It should be probably the one it's on. I think we had to reset it last time. It just says no signal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just do you see the two plugs in the wall that on the left of the TV?
It's plugged into two.
Okay.
Just unplug
Yeah, it's
both,
plugged into two.
unplug
There's
both
also,
and then
there's
plug
also
it.
a USB. I don't know if
I'll try the USB.
I would just reset the whole thing, just unplug it from the wall and plug it back in.
Okay. No, that's not bad. Go ahead and unplug the HDMI, the
Just
box.
did. Oh, I
Yeah.
just.
Can you trace that cable and unplug it, Emily? Is what the HDMI cable is plugged
Also,
into.
yeah, I think you are.
Okay, this thing. I got it. That's just.
I know, but. Never know. So I did like a little virtual hello at the very beginning of your virtual class.
Yeah.
Got it.
Hey,
Hey. Say hi, everybody.
oh, hey, hello, Oklahoma City. Make sure to grab your gifts, they're in the Tuckaloma office.
Oh, yeah, okay, I'll remind them after class.
And then you all like.
Bring them
so
to
that
Tulsa.
Have your gifts with there, and so I will get you your gifts. as well.
Oh, gifts for the team.
Yes, not gifts like.
Like a little movie.
Yeah, Lacey sticker.
Yes.
You all hear me okay there? You hear me good? Okay, all right. Well, let's hop to it.
I'm gonna leave you all.
Thank
Love
you.
you. Thanks, guys. You have, here's my number, if anything goes wrong.
Okay.
Okay, well, welcome to the third Saturday, just 2 more classes after this for this module. Pretty nuts. It's gone by super fast. And today is like the funnest day, I think, in terms of HTML, because Flexbox is awesome. It's really cool. So can you guys see my screen in Tulsa? Okay, cool. All right, so how do we get started? You should be muscle memory now of like just getting coding. What do we need to do? Open VS Code, go to a folder, make an HTML file, make a CSS file, link the CSS and HTML file. So do that real quick. So open VS Code, go to the folder where you want to put your code today. For me, that's OK Coders Curriculum Module 1, Day 6. I'm actually going to edit the curriculum level though, because I want to be able to have the syllabus and stuff available to me. All right, and then figure out where you want to put your files. I want to put mine in Day 6. And then I'm gonna make a folder in here called in class. And then I'll make my, it can be index.html or I can name it flexbox.html, whatever the name is that's appropriate. And then I'll typically now that we're going to be mainly working in these two files, I'll collapse this file explorer just to have more real estate. And then I'll drag the CSS over to the right here to kind of do that split pane view. Okay, then we'll just make a basic HTML file. Add a body. And then link our CSS file. Okay, and then just to make sure that everything's working properly, I'll just make a simple div here. I'll give it a class of container. Save it. And then I'm going to add that class over here, container. And then I'm going to give it the display property of block, which a div already has that property set to block by default. There's inline, there's block, are two of the display types we've learned. And a div is by default block. Okay, and then what's the global reset thing that we learned about last class? Where we were like, hey, we want our widths to be, the size of our boxes to be calculated differently. Mm-hmm. And how do we do that reset? Yeah, star, our asterisk, and then what was it that you said? Good. Okay, and then what do we do after this to start seeing our stuff in the browser? Yeah, so we'll go live. Make sure you click on your HTML file that so you want that to be active, and then click go live so that whenever it opens that file for us. Okay, we're not seeing anything, right? Why is that? No content. Yeah, so there is a div there, but there's nothing in it. So what do we normally put if we're just trying to put something to get started? Text, or what's the cool in the know?
Hello
Oh.
world.
Hello world. Okay, there we go. And then how do we make sure our CSS is working? Yep. So inspect, and then let's check out. So yeah, we can see our body is getting our box sizing border box, which is coming from our flexbox.css file. So I'm gonna be pretty confident now that everything's working as expected. And then we have our div. We can see there's the class container, and we can see that it's getting that display block applied to it from that class. So we're set up. I need to, sorry, there's actually, so this is pretty helpful for you guys to know about it actually. So whenever you go into DevTools, you've got these two things here. You've got the selector thing that lets you click on the page. There's also this cool laptop phone thing. And normally that's off. And so now I'm back to a normal page, but I had it on from earlier. When you click that, it lets you actually pick different screen sizes. So if you're developing for you want to see how it looks on a phone, you have like a bunch of different options here and you can add more. So I can see like, okay, what does it look like on an iPhone 12 Pro? And then it's kind of zoomed out because of the screen, but then you can kind of see what that looks like. So that's the size of the phone. And then you can also play with responsive, which lets you just kind of like drag the page however you want. And then you can just get out of this mode by clicking back on that button. Pretty helpful. Okay. So you guys learned about a new display type, which is what? Flex. Yeah. So there's all kinds of, you'll start seeing the way websites are laid out, and you'll start being able to be like, okay, I can build that pretty quickly with Flex. So if we go back to when we worked on this Elemental site, this up here, this nav, for example, with like the logo on the left and then the navigation in the middle and then some like things on the right. Super common, right? You see this on like every website. There's like variations of what's in there, but building that with Flex is really easy and fast. And then like people were like, hey, how do I do like the footer down here and stuff? Flex would help with that as well. Like this whole page, most of the stuff I would use Flex to build. So it makes it quick and easy to get a layout like this, but then it also will handle pretty much out of the box resizing appropriately to look better on different screen sizes. So notice how like a lot of stuff collapsed. For example, like oh look, they have like a not great breakpoint right there. So like when it's wide enough, it fills this whole space here. These, like I'm talking about their hours and then their address. So it's like a row. But then whenever we get smaller, you can see it collapses into more of a column. So you can get that behavior out of the box with Flexbox. So yeah, well, it's one of the most powerful. Thank you for muting. So it's a super powerful. If you are, make sure to mute if you're joining the call and not talking. So it's a super powerful, like once you learn it really well, and it takes a while to learn it really well. It's like it's really complicated. It'll like surprise you. But once you learn it really well, you'll be able to pretty much make most layouts that you want really easily. So okay, so you guys went through the free CodeCamp material. I'll go through it all today, but then I would also recommend, I've got like an interactive guide that I'll send you as well. I would do that one as well. Like this you really want to learn this stuff well. So, and it takes a little while. So if you're feeling like you don't get it quite yet, that's okay. All right, so let's start playing around. So I made this container here, and it's got hello world within it currently. And its display is block. And so one of the, like when we start dealing with Flexbox, one of the most important pieces of Flexbox is your Flex container. And the Flex container is just like typically a div that is wrapping content. And then the content within the container, do you guys know what that's called? Like if I have, so I have hello world currently, let's get rid of that. And let's add additional divs. And let's do hello world. And then let's add 2 more divs. Hello world 2. And then let's do like a double hello world. And I'm gonna use a break just for fun. Someone asked about it last time. I said never use it, but we're just gonna use it for fun. Okay, so we've got our class container div here. That's the wrapping container. Just, the parent of 3 children, 3 divs. These 3 divs are siblings of each other. And they have some text content within them. And what do we call these children in Flex parlance? There's the Flex container, and then there's the Flex items. Yes, good. And then we're not in Flex world yet until we change what property on the container. So right now it's display block. Yeah, so we change this to display flex. Okay, so now we can take a peek at our site. All right, so it doesn't look very good right now. But let's look. So we've got our container here. We've got display flex. And then we've got our flex items. We've got this one here, this one there, that one there. Okay. So let's add some things to make this a bit easier to see. So let's create an item class. And then let's add a border of 1 pixel solid black. And then let's add a background color. Who wants to pick the color today? Cyan? Is that what you said? Cool. All right, and then let's also give basically the same thing to our container. But let's make the background color. Who wants to pick the next color? Blue. Okay. And then so looking at our screen now, we've got blue with the border of 1 pixel solid black. Zoom in a little bit. But then we're not seeing any cyan. Why aren't we seeing any cyan?
We didn't assign anything to item.
Yeah.
Yep. So we're gonna add class equals item to all 3 of our items. Okay. So we've got our div, which is our flex container, which is the blue thing. The blue thing stretches all the way across the screen, so it fills up the whole space in the direction of what so like by default, if we say display flex, what direction is it? Left to right. There's another term for that. Row, yeah. So there's the flex property for display, and then there's another property called flex direction. And that is either row or column. Row being left to right, column being vertical. And by default, it's row. So if you just say display flex, by default, it's picking row as its direction. So we can see our container is the blue thing, goes all the way across the screen, And then we've got 3 items, right, with their background being cyan. And they're just like bunched up next to each other. Okay, so there's that, which is the layout, and then there's the container, which has a particular width. But like, why is everything the size it is currently? So there's a certain width that we're getting for the background, the container that's blue. There's a certain width and height that we're getting for the items as well. So why is this first one the size of this? And why is the second one the size that it is? Why is this third one the size of it is?
You tell them, Kate.
Content is dictated.
Zach, we can't hear you.
Sorry, I can't do what I just, that was bad. I went to the screen and pointed and you guys can't see that. My bad. Okay, so why is this item here, the first cyan item, the size that it is? So it's not as wide as this second one, right? And it's not as wide as this third one either.
The content is dictating that.
And the content's dictating it. Why is the container the height that it is, though? And why are these 3 items the height that they are?
Same reason?
Yeah, but not
the
all of them. So not like this one here, for example, its content fits right here, but for some reason it's got this gap here. Same
The
with this.
third item. It's that break, right?
So the third one is the tallest one because of the break. So we had it go, the content goes this wide, but then we have break, and then we have a second content that goes this wide, and that's dictating the height of this particular one here. And it's the tallest one. So the tallest item in a flex container that doesn't have a specific height, right? So we'd never specified height or width of anything. We certainly could. We can certainly say that the container should be, you know, whatever width we want, whether that's a specific pixel or like 100% or something. But since we didn't do that, that means that the items get to dictate the size of the container, and the size of the container gets dictated by the largest item in terms of the height. In this case, we're dealing. Okay, so basically we've got our flex container, its direction is row, and so the main axis of it, you guys probably heard these 2 terms. The main axis is left to right. And then there's I just blanked on the other term of the other axis. What's that? Cross axis is vertical. The cross axis will expand to fit the content. And then all the items will stretch along the cross axis. So that's just another default setting is stretch for the cross axis. It's gonna be, yeah, it's tricky. There's a lot to this. So we'll struggle through it today. And then there's the interactive guide. I guarantee you after you did the prep work we do today, and then you'll do the interactive guide and it'll click. Okay. So if we don't want these to be so bunched up, like they're right up against each other, right? So like we can do margin and stuff like that. So we want to apply margin to the items, we can do that, totally valid. There's also a cool property that we can set on the container though. And it's called gap. It's a newer property, but it's pretty cool. We can say, hey, we want a gap between our items of whatever we want to set. Let me say 10 pixels, for example. So now we've got this gap between the items. Notice it's only between the items. It's not on the left or on the right. If we wanted there to be a gap on the left or the right at the end of the container, like if we didn't want this first item, hello world, to be so close to the edge, there's always many ways we could do this. What's one way we could do it?
Adding on the item.
So we can set padding left, or so, well, padding on the item would change where hello world is showing up. So if we want to add some padding to these items, we can do that, which would definitely make them look a little better than they do currently. But padding on the items, it's going to give padding with the content. So now hello world isn't so close to the border of the box. But if I want this whole box to not be so close to this left edge of the whole container, I can also use padding, but not on the item, but on the container. And so I can say, hey, let's on the container, let's do like padding left of 10 pixels, and then maybe I'll also do padding on the right. So the padding right's not really doing much at the moment, but notice now this first item here isn't so close to the edge of the container. Okay. All right, so let's start doing the stuff that's like really helpful with Flex. So let's imagine that we want these to be positioned differently. We want them to be spread apart within this container. We want them to like take up the space of the container. Does anybody know what so there's a few things. So I want to keep I want those items to be the current size that they are. So just size based off their content, but I want them to just spread out evenly throughout the container. What on the main axis. So like in the horizontal direction, I want them to spread out.
Justify.
Yeah, so there's a property called justify content. Okay. And then does anybody know some of the options that I can pass to justify content? Space between. Does anybody know the default setting for justify content? Flex start. Yeah, so right now it's set to flex start. That's what justify content is set to. And you remember, this is like all in the container. Like most of the action is on the container. And then the items just like follow what the container is telling them to do. So we set on the container justify content. And then we say, so if we set flex start, that's what's set by default. So we just see what we're currently seeing. But if we want them to spread out, there's a few different ones that we can do. So there's space around is one of them. So yeah, I wanted these to kind of spread out and just kind of fill the container. So I can say, hey, justify the content to be spaced around. And notice there's like, like probably 200 pixels of space around the content here. And then there's, I don't know, maybe 100 pixels on the edges. So there's more space, there's more space like between the content items than there is space between the like edges of the container with space around. But we can do space evenly. And notice now basically every gap here is the same size. So the space is like evenly distributed across the container. Or I can say flex end and everything shifts to the right. I can tell that everyone's struggling with this. Everyone's like staring at me, freaked out.
Go fast.
How are you guys feeling in Tulsa about this?
You're going a little fast.
You going fast for me,
Okay,
but I'll get
Fast?
it later, I guess.
I have a
Very-
question.
very fast. Yeah, what's the question?
Is it common to create your classes before you assign them in HTML?
It doesn't matter. I mean, I
Every time
forgot.
he pulls up that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know, it's probably good to. I mean, you have to do both. And so,
Right.
preference.
Yeah. I don't know that mine's
Great.
not.
Oh.
Like, are you sure this is the way you did it?
All right, any other questions also?
So your container, your stuff is in.
I don't think so.
So what you have.
All right, so. I'll slow down. If you guys are trying to follow along with the code, I'll let you look at it for a second.
The thing is, it's easier eventually.
No, I wouldn't say.
Can you have containers inside containers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You guys are already struggling though. Let's not get into that, but
Okay.
yeah, so you can nest as deeply as you want. Flex, and that's actually quite useful and it's a common pattern. But I don't know if we're gonna get there today. Okay, if things are really difficult, I think the best way to fix it is to see like practical real world examples. So one of the most common uses of Flex is nav bars. So I mentioned this here. So I mean, look at this, that what I've got set up here. And then look at this nav bar. Pretty close, right? They don't look quite the same, but like it's a similar concept, right? There's a container and then there's items within the container. And like, if you look at what's going on here, there's sort of like three things. There's the left, and then there's the middle, and then there's the right. And there's kind of this nice spacing between these items, and then this kind of nice spacing between these items. And like, as it shrinks and grows, that sort of the grouping and the space between things also changes to be dynamic with the screen size. So this is most likely done. I don't know exactly how they built this, but it's most likely done with Flex. And so we can use the stuff that we just learned to try and create a layout like this, for example. A more simple layout than this one even would be just like, think about a site that's got a logo nav on the left, and then just like nav items on the right over here. So let's just try to do that. So let me actually make a new file for us. We'll do nav.html and then nav.css. And we'll just start over and kind of rebuild everything from scratch in order to try and build a nav. Okay, so first thing is make our HTML. Make our head. Add our title. And then add our link to our CSS. And then our body. Can you guys see this okay back there? Okay, then we just want nav. That's all we're building. And typically a nav has a specific height. Like we only want it to be a certain height. We don't want it to like grow or anything. So we like set a specific height for our nav. So we can do, isn't nav an element? Yeah, okay. So we'll do nav to be good. And then we're only making one nav, so this might be a good use case of an ID. Yeah.
The link, is it supposed to be Braille?
Yeah, for sure. Yes. I haven't done my flight check yet of like connecting it to the browser. Yeah, but good catch. Yeah. Okay, so but honestly, like it would have been good practice to like you don't want to just keep coding without checking everything. It's making sure everything is working. Otherwise, like if you code a bunch of stuff and then you realize it's broken, like so many things could be broken. And so you kind of want to make sure that everything's going okay as you go. And so like just making sure that, I've got like everything hooked up correctly would have been a good thing to do. So we don't have any content yet, so that would be hard to do. So we probably would have gotten a little bit further. But yeah, just keep that in mind. Like you always want to like code a little bit and then check and then code a little bit and then check. All right, so we have nav, and then I'm gonna add, navs usually have links, and so I'm going to do a href equals, and then we don't want to link anywhere, we're just doing an example, so I'm just gonna do the hashtag. And then we can put, logo, so pretend this link is the logo, and then let's add 2 more items. One that's like contact, and then one that's like about us.
So when creating HTML, is it necessary to do the doc type, or are you able to just do the HTML opening and closing brackets?
Yeah, technically you're supposed to put doc type, but a browser will like make inferences if stuff is like missing. And so like since the first tag is an HTML tag, it like guesses the doc type is HTML. So it'll work as we've seen it work, but it's like not correct. It's not correct. It would be more proper to put the doc type HTML tag. So you should do that. But I was just skipping it because it's not totally necessary. When we get to React, we don't really ever make like pages from scratch, and so I kind of forget to do it, the doc type thing. All right, so I didn't apply any CSS yet, but let's just look at what this looks like out of the box. So out of the box, we're getting a nav, it's display block, and then it's got 3 Ahrefs. And so everything's just on the left. So I switched files on you, so you want to make sure to click, you want to like turn live off and then go to nav and then go live again, basically, to start it on that file. All right, so what we're going for here is we want like a nav of a certain height, and we want it to have a background color. Most navs have some sort of background color that's different than the rest of the body. And then we want like our links and our logo to kind of all be in line. We want them like at the same vertical height. And then we want the contact and about us to be on the far right. And we want the logo to stay on the left. And then as the page resizes and stuff, we want it to get, it'll get closer, and that's okay. So one thing we need to do is add to nav we can do a class or an ID. Since like there's only one nav, I think an ID is an appropriate selector here, so we can do ID equals like nav or navbar. And then we would do nav. All right, so I want it to be a particular height and I want it to be a certain color. So I'll do height is 150 pixels. And then background color, who wants to pick the color? Flexbox is like bringing people down. People are not happy about Flexbox. Red. All right, man, when you zoom in a lot, pixels are a lot bigger. It's way too big. Do 50. Okay. All right, so this is how tall we want the nav to be. We want the nav to be 50 pixels. But notice like we introduce, sorry, can't do that. We introduced our first problem, which is that the container is 50 pixels high. And now like our links are like smushed up at the top. And that doesn't look very good. We don't like that. We want those to be vertically centered. Vertically meaning up and down, and then centered being in the middle there. So like we could, we could futz around with like padding and margin and stuff, but it's a lot easier to just use flex, and like, we could set the margin padding, but then as the screen resizes, it may not look right. So have we done, like, is anything flex yet on this page? Well, look at the code here. We're still in like display block world. So to set ourselves to be in flex world, we need a flex container. What should be our flex container? The nav. The nav is the container. Yeah. And then the items are what? The links. Yeah. Good. All right. So on nav, we'll set display to be flex. Let me save this. Has anything changed yet? Still looks the same. It might have gotten a little scrunched, actually. Yeah. It kind of pushed the items together. So with display block, I think you get like a default. You get some sort of default margin or something. Okay, so, but really nothing changed. All right, so first thing is, okay, now we want to get these items vertically centered. So we're in flex world now. Our container is the big red row. Like, so display flex by default is a row. So our main axis is which way? Left to right or top to bottom? Left to right. And then our cross axis is top to bottom, vertical. So we want to align these items vertically. And so justify content is for the main axis, for left to right. So if we wanted these things to be at the beginning or in the middle or spaced evenly or at the end, we would use justify content, because that's left to right in terms of positioning left to right. But if we want to position top to bottom, there's a different property in flex. Does anybody know what that is? Align items, yeah. There's like two main ones. I forget all the time which one is which. All the time, I'll like use align items when I'm meaning to use justify content. And then you'll just like, it's not looking right. And then you go, okay, I'll just use the other one. So align items though is, in this case, since we're dealing with the bottom. And so if we want these vertically centered, we'll do align items, what? Centered, yeah. So on nav, we've got display flex, and then we do align items. And there's a few options. The default is flex start, but we'll do center. And now like, looks pretty good. They're all smushed. So we talked about how we want these to get displayed, but in terms of like the contact and about us being on the right, but just to get some spacing between them, what was that property that I mentioned? Gap, yeah. Which is basically just applying margin to each of the items. But yeah, we'll do gap 10 pixels just to make it look a little better from. Okay. The nav is like, notice we've got this gap here on the page. Does anybody remember what's like adding this gap? On like everything on the page is kind of separated from the edge of the page. I heard whispers. Heard a lot of whispers. Yeah, there's margin. Remember, there was like margin that was set on the body. And so we can get rid of that because a nav always, is flush with everything. So we'll just, oh, what's the other, we forgot to do what?
box.
Box sizing.
Box.
Box sizing,
There we go.
order box. And then we'll do body. We're gonna target, remember, body is just an element. It doesn't have an ID or a class on it. It's just an element on the page. I mean, we could put one on it if we wanted to, but we can target it and then set margin to 0 pixels. Okay, so now our nav looks flush.
So do you have to put pixels every time, or can you just put 0?
You can put 0. Yeah, that's fine too. All right, the logo is kind of scrunched up against the left here. So the way we fixed that earlier was with padding. And so we'll just do padding left on the nav. Maybe like 10 pixels. Cool. Okay, so the last thing we want to do is get it so that the logo stays on the left and then the contact and about us goes to the right. There's actually a few ways to do this, like everything. There's like a lot of ways that we can do it. I actually just learned the way that we're going to do it this morning. You just learn something new every day. When I was reading the guide, I'm going to have you read after this because I think it's going to really help. I saw this trick. It's pretty cool. Otherwise, I normally would nest flex boxes so you can have more than one. You can do like, you can have like a row and then you've got your items, but then an item itself can be a flex container. And we're just not going to deal with that today. I can tell that's just going to be too much. So we'll do this trick I found today and we won't have to have nested containers. But that's a very common thing and you'll get used to it at some point. You'll see something you're trying to build and then you'll understand like, okay, yeah, I've got this thing that's going to be that, but then it's going to be an item within another container and that's fine. But we won't worry about that. All right, so if I just wanted everything here, all the items to be all the way to the right, are we dealing with align items or are we dealing with justified content? Yeah, so justified content and then all the way to the right is what? Flex end, yeah. Now, like, we could just like space all of this stuff evenly. So we could say like justify content. Oh. You know, space between or something. Or space evenly or space around. All of those kind of just spread everything apart, but there's just slight differences between how big the gaps are. So, you know, we could do that, but that's not what we want. We want sort of this, but we want contact to be all the way to the right as well. So I'll just mention though, normally I would, and before I knew this trick, normally I would have done nesting. And the way that I would have done it is like, right now we have 3 items. But we could have 2. We could have one item that's the logo and then another div that's the contact and the about us. Like it would be the parent to the contact and about us. And then if we just had 2 items and we wanted one all the way on the right and one all the way on the left and one all the way on the right, we'd do what? Justify content. If we want them as far apart as possible. Space between, yeah. So we would just, you know, spread them as far apart as possible, which would be all the way to the left and all the way to the right. And then within the contact and about us, I would just make that another flex row and I would just have them have a gap basically. So they'd be right next to each other and then just slightly spread apart. So that's the nesting idea. But besides implementing it that way, we can say, hey, let's do flex end. So I want everything to be justify content flex end. Now everything's on the far right. I don't like how close about us is to the edge. So what do we need to do there?
I think, right?
Yeah. padding right. So we got padding left, and let's just add padding right. Okay, and now the goal is just to get logo all the way to the left. So the trick I learned this morning, well, did any of you learn about Flex Grow? Does anybody remember this? Okay. All right, so we'll talk about that after our break here. But basically the trick here is we can, on logo, we want it to be all the way to the left. So we're going to, like, now we're outside of the container land. Like, there's not anything we can do with the container. We want to, we want one item to be different than the rest. So we have to target that item. So I'm going to add an ID to this Ahref, which can be like logo, for example. And then I'm gonna target it. And then you can do margin right auto. And it like basically takes up all the space available on the right for it and pushes it all the way to the left. This is just one way to do it. There's like so many ways to do this. But yeah, if we look at what's going on now, if we look at the nav, so here's our whole container. And you can see it might be hard to see. The colors are really, our choice of red is backfiring. There we go. Okay, still not great, but we can see kind of the padding on the left and right. And then if we go to our logo, we can see that the orange box there is the margin auto. So it's just adding all that margin. Remember when we messed with margin auto before, it just like filled the space on the left and right that was available. So that's what's happening here still. And then we've got our items at like flex to the end for contact and about us. So this is one way to build a nav bar. And this is based off the requirements we had, which was logo on the left and then contact and about us on the right. But like the elemental site was slightly different. It's like logo on the left, stuff in the middle, stuff on the right. But we can pull that off. It's sort of like, for that one, the way that you would think about it is like, well, there's sort of three things. There's stuff on the left, stuff in the middle, stuff on the right. So you'd build flex box with 3 items. And then what does this look like? If you just think of these 3 items, don't think of the fact that there's 6 items in the middle. Just think of it as one group of stuff. What does it look like in terms of justified content?
Space between.
Exactly. Yeah. So you would say, okay, I'll just make 3 divs real quick. I'll space between them. And now you've got this sort of setup. And then within those 3 divs, you're going to then attack. Okay, I'll add a logo to the first one. Then I'm going to add 6 items to the middle one. And I might do, I might do flex and I might do a gap, for example. Right. And then I'll put 2 items in the end one, do the same thing. And then both of those, we would need to do the align items center to get it vertically centered. Like everything would need to get that property. But that's how you would build this basically, or that's one way to build this that you see here. So I said I wasn't going to mention the nesting thing, but like it's super powerful. Okay, let's take a break. I'll leave this code that we did. So here's our beautiful nav. And I'll leave the code up here for a minute. All right, so we'll take a 10-minute break. Cool.
I'm just gonna walk around and grab it, so it's really quick. Yeah, two more things. News. Okay. There's some. I think she is. Yeah, that's a good one. Give us the project last week, lead us. Make it exactly like that.
Say that one more time.
Did you like last
The
time?
elemental site.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Things like these things with that. Today's what. Like that.
Yeah. No, I think it was just more of an effort, like to try and get it to look like that. Yeah, but quite hard without the stuff we're learning now. Yeah.
Do you feel like I'll let do one?
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, I love that place. Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
this stuff.
Yeah.
Hope
Where yeah. Where do you live now? Oh,
I think if we're getting in the jail, I think like it.
yeah. All right, Tulsa, you ready? Cool. Okay, so we're not gonna learn much more. I can tell this is just, yeah, it's a lot. So we're gonna learn one more thing and then we're gonna just work on an exercise. And then I'm gonna walk you through the guide because I think that's let me just show it real quick. So there's this interactive guide to Flexbox. It'll go over everything and more that we did today. And I think what's really helpful about it is it lets you interact with it. So it shows the code, but then I think what really locks it in is this page right here. So it shows you this example of something that's currently set to row with 4 items in it. And then it lets you just change it. So we haven't even talked about column, but that's okay because we mainly are going to be using row. But that just lets you change the direction. But justify content and align items were the 2 main things that we were trying to learn. And so this lets you just change it. So change it to center and see what it does, and change it to between and see what it does, and change it to whatever and see what it does. And then same thing with the line items. So you can just like play with this thing for like 30 minutes and then it'll feel a lot better. And then you can go on to learn the next thing. So I think this will hopefully really lock it in for you after you go through this. So I'll probably change up the homework a little bit because I can tell I need to. Because yeah, we need like learning this really well is like the most important thing. Like it's like what lets you build most of the stuff you need to build with HTML. Okay, so there's one more thing I want us to learn though, and then we'll do an exercise. So we'll stay in our nav file. Actually, let's go back to our Flexbox file. And then close your live server and open it up again from that file. Excuse me. All right, so here's our back to our hello world example. Let me open this up. And then don't worry so much about following along the code at this moment, because I'm gonna have you do an exercise. So I'll leave the code up and you can start with the exercise copying the code that I have. Okay, so let me open this up. All right, so I'm gonna make a new div here. And I'm gonna give it class container 2.
You've got the wrong CSS file up.
Oh, thank you. Look at all of you paying such good attention. All right. That would have been confusing. Container 2. And then I'm going to put a div and call it class equals tag. And then I'm gonna put like a tag, so like JavaScript. And then I'm gonna make another tag here, HTML, and another tag, CSS. Okay, so container 2, that's gonna be our Flux container, and then 3 items, Flux items. Container 2 is the class for the container, and then I've got, for each Flux item, I got this class tag. So I need to make both of these. So I'm gonna make container 2 display is gonna be Flux. We're still in Flux direction row land. But I'm gonna do one thing differently here is I'm gonna set a width to this. So normally the width just goes all the way across the page. But I'm gonna set a width of, I have no idea how big 200 pixels is anymore. And then I'm gonna make this tag class. That's gonna be dot tag. It's gonna have a background color of into the cyan now. Border radius of 20 pixels maybe. Height of 10 pixels. And then on my container, I'm gonna give a gap of 10 pixels. All right, that was a lot of coding before seeing it. Let me actually just get rid of this height for now. And then I want this to be not so close to that. So I'm gonna just set a margin top of 50 pixels. And then see how this kind of is like we have the box, right? And I did the border radius, but like the box is still the box and the content's kind of overflowing. So to kind of get the content to be more inside the tag, what do I use? Have more space on the between the content and the edge. Is it margin or padding? Padding. Okay, so it kind of looks like a tag, right? Maybe we need a border. Definitely looks like a tag. Okay. All right, so I've got, let me open up DevTools. So I have this container and it's set to a particular width, 200 pixels. Um, the max that I can do. All right, it's set to a particular width, so as I get smaller, it's just like overflowing the page. And if I had like a particular width on these tags, for example, like if I specified I wanted a certain size for these tags. The container. This. The container is like not respecting that size. Even though I asked for it, because with Flex, like you can ask for a width, but if there's not enough room, it's gonna shrink the item like automatically. So if we want something to be a particular size, so look at so this is a GitHub page that has, you can like search for topics that have the tag React. So these are just a bunch of repos that have React in them. And like if you look at this page, we've got this kind of repeating column of these are repos each. So this is like a repo card. And it has a particular size, right? Like it's only a certain width. And so there's this section of this that's like, okay, well, let's show the tags here. But they only want the tags to go a certain width. And so this is a good example here of something where if we have a bunch of, like, so sometimes we just have a few tags. So there's only a few here. It doesn't ever go to the width of the container that it's in. But in certain cases, this one has a ton of, oh, free code camp. Wow. That's funny. This one has a ton of tags. And so it's going past the width of the container. But we want our tags to be like a certain size. We don't want them to like keep shrinking. So does anybody know what property is applied to here that allows this? I don't want to say the word, this new wrap. Yeah. So there's a wrap happening here. And so there's a property in Flex called Flex wrap. And normally that's set to like none. It won't wrap, but we can tell it to wrap. So we can say, hey, if your content starts being too big for the container in terms of the main direction, left to right in this case, you can wrap. So instead of shrinking them, like you can let them be the width they want to be and then just wrap it. So we can apply that to our container. And we can say Flex wrap is wrap. And then notice, like I asked for my tags to be 100 pixels, and before they weren't. There is a min width with text, like sorry, don't worry about that. So I want them to be 100 pixels, and they weren't when I only had 200, because I had 3 items and there was only 200 pixels of space. So it's 300 pixels too big, so it's got to shrink everything to fit. But if I don't want it to shrink to fit, I can let it wrap. And notice it now just looks like a column, like it's just stacked vertically. Which is a common thing that we've seen. We saw that on the Elemental site. When here's a row, right? With the weekdays, weekends address, that's a row. And then when it shrank, it just went to a column. So that's simply just flex wrap, most likely. We could look at their code and see what it is if we want to. And this is probably like a Squarespace site or something like that. So who knows how they did their stuff, but
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you said it was.
boom, flex wrap. Right there. Sorry. Go ahead.
So I just wanna be clear on, you said the tags were 300 worth of pixels, but the space was like 200 or whatever. Was that what it was set to? Or was that the default?
Yeah, good question. So so let's click on this container. So I set the,
Okay, I see. Was it the width 200 pixel?
yeah, so I sort of arbitrarily just said, hey, this is only going to be 200 pixels. But that happens because when we looked at this here, like this tag section of the repo page on GitHub is only like 300 or 400 pixels. So they set a specific width. And so that's what I did here. I said, hey, this container here that has these tags in it is only going to be 200 pixels. I can increase it. So let's say it's, when we get to 300, well, there's space between them because of gaps. So we have to go a little over 300. But once I have enough room, notice the width is 343. So I've got 3 items and they all need to be 100 pixels. And then we need 10 pixels of gap between them. So they all fit now. They all show up there. Without flex wrap, if I make this smaller, it starts to shrink things. It starts to shrink the different tags. So notice JavaScript, HTML, CSS, they're all getting smaller. We may want that in certain cases and we may not in others. And so flex wrap by default doesn't wrap, but we can ask it to. So now once I add flex wrap back, it's like, hey, I'm not going to shrink these anymore. They all want to be 100 pixels. So I'll let them be 100 pixels, but since I don't have enough room, I'll wrap. So the moment that I add wrap, they go back to the size that they should have been, but now they're in a column. And
Okay.
really what's happening is it's still row, but now there's 3 rows is what it's doing basically.
So it just adjusts to the width that we set. Is there ever a time where we just have like an auto or an adjustable width? Does that make sense? Or we always want to set it.
Yeah, everything we did before this example, we let the width be whatever it was, which was just however wide the screen is. So a lot of times, it depends on what you're building, right? So if we go back to just a real world website, certain things are okay, or we want to take up the full width of whatever screen someone's on. So if you look at this site here, they want the nav to take the full width. So they let the nav take the full width. I mean, what is this? This looks like the exact example we went through today, just a little more complex, right? Where there's some stuff on the left and there's some stuff on the right. And so they've got a row, it's a certain height. They've got the align items to be center so that they're all vertically aligned. Then they've got 2 different sort of groupings, the one on the left and then the one on the right. And then there's the different items within those groupings. And that doesn't have a width set, this nav. It'll be whatever width the viewport is. It'll take up the whole thing. So that's sort of like auto width, right? Just take up whatever room there is. But they want these cards here the ones that have the details on what I searched, the result cards. They want those to have a max width. So like they set a max width on these to be whatever it is, so it doesn't keep growing with the page size. Because if that just went all the way across the page, it would be kind of hard to read. It'd be hard
Yeah.
to parse the information. So they set a width on that, and then because of that, we also have a width set on the container that contains the tags within it. So it's a mix. It's like kind of whatever the needs of your website are. And
Cause if
notice,
you're looking on the small, if you're looking at it on your phone,
Mhm.
you know, you don't want it to be that huge pixel, right?
Yeah, so on our phone, if we're on a iPhone 12 Pro, like here's what you want it to look like. So you should be noticing a decent amount of flex wrap happening, actually. Like look at this here. These different nav links at the top. Like as it gets too small, it just wraps and adds it to the next line. So like I know it's a confusing thing, but there's just a few concepts to master, and then you can just like you can just build anything. Okay, so we're not learning anything else today. What you're gonna do with the remaining time is work by yourself or with a partner if you want, whatever you prefer within your team, to build this exactly. So try to replicate this tag section right here, including like the hover states and the color and the everything. But to get this set up here, you really should just need a flex row that has flex wrap applied to it. That has so the row should have a width, right? Because there's a max width here of like 200 or 300 pixels. And then you'll add flex wrap, and then you can set like it's a pretty small gap between these. It's like 1 pixel gap. So just try to replicate this here, including the hover. Does that make sense? The goal here? So you'll make a simple container that has like a width of 200, 300 pixels, somewhere around there. You'll have a bunch of tags within it. And they should wrap. As you add more tags, it should just keep getting taller.
Really quick, can you go back to your CSS so I didn't finish copying the code.
Yeah, I'll leave this up. So you should just basically need to copy the container 2 and the tag CSS, and then it's just this section here that we had for the HTML. I'll just leave that up. And if you need help, got people hanging out. And if anybody needs help in Tulsa, just ping in Slack, and then I can hop on. One of the mentors can hop on Zoom with you privately, if you want.
I put a question in the chat already.
Okay.
So you guys wanna do individual or partners?
Where was your question in the chat? Oh, in the Zoom chat?
No, mine's in
Slack.
it's in Slack, but my text in the tags, for some reason, it's got a height of 0. And so the margin is making everything like not inside the tag. I put a screenshot in the
Yeah. No.
Yeah, in the cohort.
Oh, I see. So don't put a height on your container too.
That was just me trying to fix it.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
have a height, and I have the same problem. What do you
I
do?
usually have one, it's like, what is going on, now mine's working.
I'm gonna post this code in Slack so you guys can see it so I can stop sharing so I can let people in Tulsa share.
I'm just.
Oh, yeah.
Starting to, I kind of gave up on it. But I'm down there for this.
You
killed it. You're doing better than me.
I just want to skate.
I just automatically did. That's what.
Share, whoever's having the issue, share your screen with me.
See, when I did that.
It has to be CSS.
But do you have, I have a container too. Do you not have a container?
Can you see it?
Oh, I didn't make it.
You
You just did everything in the past. Yeah.
did you do share screen from like, I think you might have to like join the meeting for me to see it.
Okay.
See, it doesn't
You can-
change the size of the class.
So container 2, I don't think it matters, but you have single quotes in your HTML on line 16. Oh, dude, double quotes. Okay, and then You also have container 2 has width 200 pixels and width 100 pixels, so just get rid of line 27. And then get rid of the height on the tag. Cool.
So that was it? It was just the height on the tag?
Probably because as 20 pixels isn't enough to fit that text in there, I don't think.
Okay.
Because you have a font size of 20 pixels as well, which is pretty big.
That was also I was trying to fix it with that, but maybe it was the height. That's the problem.
Yeah. Because yeah, if you don't set height, it'll just the content will dictate the height for you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.